Dear friends and ardent supporters, welcome once again to this epicenter of fascinating rediscoveries, the Quintilian Institute of Words About Words. Recently, our junior team of researchers produced a stunning rediscovery of an immeasurably engaging and straightforward set of terms, the beautiful Adjunctio, Conjunctio, and Disjunctio. These Junctio triplets are, of course, related, but also distinct. It just wouldn't do to have multiple words for the same thing, because of course that would be chaos and despair. Luckily, though, that's not what we're dealing with, so because it's always nice to have a little bit of cheeky fun, why not begin with Disjunctio? Disjunctio describes instances where multiple parallel clauses express similar ideas with related but different verbs. For example, on that fateful day, they scoffed the roast beef, consumed the carrots, devoured the endives, and inhaled the eclairs. In such cases of disjunction, the repeated elements are held together by essentially the same meaning, but they are kept separate by their own unique verbs. Such a strategy gives you the opportunity to leverage repeated structures to highlight different shades of meaning, or to show off your vocabulary, and let's be frank, grandiloquence must rank among the most benign of vices. But if disjunctio holds clauses apart with unique verbs, conjunctio brings clauses together with the same verb, and adjunctio too, but in a different way. The guiding principle here is that both conjunctio and adjunctio will hold two clauses together with a single verb. When we're working with conjunctio, we have a verb sitting between two clauses governing both of them. For example, the ice cream I ate, and the cake, or either after the video I will subscribe or during. Admittedly, this structure is probably better suited to the Latin that it came from. The syntax does sound a touch strained to my Anglophone ear. Nevertheless, it is an interesting little trick. With adjunctio, we get the same basic concept, but this time the verb comes either at the beginning or the end of both clauses. For example, under sunlight or heat lamps, ice cream melts, or melts ice cream under both sunlight and heat lamps. Again, perhaps we wonder about the syntax, but we're really all about learning our options. Using them is never compulsory. In fact, well, wait, what? Why didn't they... Well, I'm sorry for that interruption, but it appears that our junior researchers who spearheaded the discovery of adjunctio, conjunctio, and disjunctio have waited until now to inform me that our definition of adjunctio sounds an awful lot like our definition of zeugma. See, with adjunctio, a single verb governs multiple clauses, but with zeugma, a single verb also governs multiple clauses. How fun! So now, thanks to this most timely of interventions, we have the opportunity to sort this mess out live on camera. Let me assure you, dear viewers, that it is not every day that the inner workings of the Institute are put on such public display. I can assure you that nobody is quite so embarrassed as our junior researchers, so please pity them rather than me. At any rate, let us embark on this intractable controversy which will matter very little to a select few and not at all to everyone else. Okay, so let's get this straight. It appears that conjunctio, adjunctio, and disjunctio appear first in the rhetorical ad horennium, which makes sense given their thoroughly Latin pedigree. In that treatise, we see these definitions and examples. Conjunction occurs when both the previous and the succeeding phrases are held together by place and the verb between them, as follows. Either with disease, physical beauty fades, or with age. It is adjunction when the verb holding the sentence together is placed not in the middle, but at the beginning or the end. At the beginning, as follows, fades physical beauty with disease or age. At the end, as follows, either with disease or age, physical beauty fades. So this gets us somewhere, perhaps, but the good news is that these words about words also appear in the 1550 Treatise of Schemes and Tropes by Richard Sherry, which reads as follows. Junctio, joining, is when in like sentences a certain common thing that is put in the one and not changed in the other is not expressed, but left out. First, when it is set before and is called prejunctio, as there did overcome in him lechery his chastity, sauciness his fear, madness his reason. Secondly, when it is set in the middle and is called mediajunctio, as beauty either by age decayeth or by sickness. Thirdly, when it is put in the end and is called postjunctio, as beauty by sickness, by sorrow, or by age decayeth. You might notice that Sherry uses the same beauty-based examples as the ad horennium, and, joy of joys, this same singular set of examples is repeated in more contemporary sources like Burton and Lanham. Now, when we look at Zeugma, we get various different examples, but the same principle of a single word governing multiple clauses, of course, remains the same. Lanham provides this example of Zeugma from Puttenham. Fair maid's beauty, alack, with years it wears away, and with weather and sickness and sorrow, as they say. Oh good, more fading beauty and grammatical similarities. Okay, so here's what we know about both Zeugma and Adjunctio. The Junctios really only have one attested example, which hinges on two clauses being governed by a single verb. So perhaps it's fair to say that Conjunctio and Adjunctio require only a single verb and two grammatical units. In contrast, Zeugma doesn't seem to be so restricted either in terms of part of speech or number of units. Lanham points to this example taken from Pope, who could not win the mistress, wooed the maid, and now a bubble burst, and now a world, where nature moves and rapture warms the mind. So not all of these are verbs, but they are all pairs. And so with that in mind, is that second line Zeugma or Conjunctio? It really seems I'm learning a thing or two about bursting bubbles and worlds tonight. Let's just call them synonyms, you might say. Zeugma is to Zeus what Junctio is to Jupiter. It's a pretty simple solution, well, except Lanham asserts in no uncertain terms that Conjunctio, Adjunctio, and Disjunctio should not be treated as synonyms of Zeugma and its various forms. He writes, "These three terms are not, it should be noted, parallel to prozeugma, mesozeugma, and hypozeugma. In pondering the differences, it is helpful to distinguish between position, beginning, middle, and end, and whether the governing word is a verb or just a verbum." All better now, right? So according to Lanham, we should be paying attention to position with one, but not the other. Never mind the fact that Conjunctio and Mesozeugma, which are not synonyms, both involve setting a verb between two clauses. And of course, I'm sure there's something we could do with the distinction between verb and verbum, or the Latin word for word. Maybe Junctio requires specifically a verb, while Zeugma is happy with just any old verbum. The best help we can get, I think, is from Lanham's formal definitions of Adjunctio and Conjunctio, both of which include the idea that the clauses must express similar ideas or have similar meanings. This is something that isn't expressed in any of the various definitions of Zeugma that are out there. Well, faithful friends, if anything, we've demonstrated here today that the rigors of rediscovering words about words is not always as glamorous as it sometimes seems. It becomes especially difficult, in fact, when words about words are expressed with primarily only a single example in multiple sources over thousands of years. Can we say with absolute certainty whether Adjunctio or Zeugma are synonyms or cousins? Well, maybe, but the sample size of examples for Adjunctio is a sample size of 1, so good luck building your case. So, what do you think? I mean, if you're still here, should we just call it all Zeugma, or is Lanham on to a useful distinction? Is the ad horennium describing a fundamentally different phenomenon, or is it just using Latin instead of Greek? While you ponder that, I think I need to have a word with our junior researchers. And maybe also a nap.